Smart people don't have photographic memories. They have something better. They've hacked the way human brains actually work. While you're highlighting textbooks and making flashcards, they're using psychological tricks that most people stumble onto by accident if they stumble onto them at all. They're not studying harder. They're not even studying longer. And that the smartest people figured out how to reverse engineer their own brains? They're exploiting biological loopholes in how memory forms that make everything else you've tried look like ancient torture. What if I told you that everything you learned about learning in school was designed to make you forget? The memory lie you've been living. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your brain doesn't want to remember what you're trying to learn. It's literally designed to forget. Your neurons are running a constant deletion program, wiping out anything that doesn't seem immediately relevant to survival. Those hours you spent rereading chapters, your brain interpreted that as this information is so unimportant that I have to keep looking it up. He called it teaching what you learn, but what he really discovered was how to expose the lies your brain tells itself about understanding. The highlighting. Your brain saw that as this person doesn't trust me to identify what's important. The cramming. Your brain starts producing sentences like, well, it's kind of like ... double quotes and then stops. Each I don't actually get this moment is where real learning begins. They've turned confusion into a compass that points toward genuine understanding. Because you realize you don't actually understand what you thought you understood. You've been carrying around the illusion of knowledge. Your brain treated that as temporary emergency information, delete after use. They draw diagrams without looking. They write explanations without references. They solve problems without examples. They make their brains sweat. Smart people discovered something that sounds like neuroscience fiction. The brain learns better when you force it to struggle. Not the kind of struggle where you bang your head against a wall, but the specific kind of struggle where you try to recall something that's just barely out of reach. They've discovered that your brain has two completely different systems: recognition and recall. Recognition is easy. You can recognize a face or a concept when you see it. They're not fighting forgetting. They're using it as a memory enhancement tool. Your brain wants to study everything right now, all at once. Smart people have learned to ignore this instinct because they've discovered that spacing feels inefficient, but is actually the most efficient thing you can do. They don't just learn facts, they learn how facts relate to other facts they already know. Recall is hard. You have to pull that information out of nothing. Your brain interprets that difficulty as this must be important information and builds stronger neural pathways around it. They learn to weaponize forgetting. They close the book and try to explain it to an imaginary person who knows nothing about the subject. They're not just storing information, they're weaving it into the existing structure of their knowledge. Smart people have learned to exploit this psychological tendency ruthlessly. They turn learning into a game of analogies and connections. They've discovered that learning doesn't have to be dignified to be effective. Not summarize it, explain it. It's like their life depends on making it crystal clear to someone who's never heard these concepts before. The Feynman Revelation. This is about creating multiple retrieval pathways to the same information. When you encode something through multiple senses, you're not just storing it once, you're storing it multiple times in different formats. They don't just read about concepts, they draw them, say them out loud, write them from memory, and even act them out when no one's looking. Smart people have learned to chase it. Richard Feynman, the physicist who could explain quantum mechanics to a 5-year-old, accidentally discovered the most powerful learning technique in human history. Not less total time, less frequent sessions spread over more time. They've figured out how to hack the spacing effect, one of the most robust findings in all of psychology. Smart people don't just read something and move on. But here's the loophole. If you review something just as you're about to forget it, you don't just restore the memory, you make it stronger than it was before. What happens when you try this is terrifying and magical. The smart people's secret. They've learned to love these moments of intellectual humiliation. The recall revolution. While you're passively reviewing notes, smart people are actively torturing their memory in the most productive way possible. Guess which one actually builds lasting memory? Guess which one most people never practice? Smart people have learned to close their books and force themselves to recreate everything from memory. Here's the twist that changes everything. The harder it is to recall something, the stronger the memory becomes when you finally retrieve it. Most people avoid this discomfort. The spacing secret smart people discovered something that sounds counterintuitive. They learn more by studying less frequently. Your brain has a forgetting curve. Information starts decaying immediately after you learn it. Smart people have learned to surf this forgetting curve. They review hard material every few days, medium material every week, easy material every month. The weird part? This feels wrong. The connection conspiracy. Here's where smart people's learning strategy gets almost supernatural. They've learned to turn their existing knowledge into a web that catches new information. When they encounter something new, they immediately ask, "What does this remind me of?" Your brain loves patterns. It craves connections. When you can relate new information to something you already understand, your brain treats it like familiar territory instead of foreign invasion. They've discovered that analogy isn't just a teaching tool, it's a memory multiplication device. It's a multisensory advantage. Smart people have figured out that your brain has multiple input channels, and most people are only using one. This isn't just about learning styles. That's been debunked. Smart people have learned to be shameless about this. They'll draw terrible diagrams, make up ridiculous songs, or create physical gestures to represent abstract concepts. The reflection trap. Here's the learning hack that separates smart people from everyone else. They've learned to study their own studying. After every learning session, they ask themselves 3 questions that most people never think to ask. What worked? What didn't? What am I still confused about? They've turned their brain into a laboratory where they experiment on their own cognition. Smart people have learned to treat their learning methods like hypotheses that need constant testing and refinement. This isn't just self-reflection, it's metacognitive monitoring. They're studying how they study, learning how they learn, and constantly optimizing their own learning process. Most people study the same way forever, even when it's not working. They don't just feed their minds, they feed their brains. They've discovered that sleep, exercise, and nutrition aren't luxuries, they're learning tools. They've discovered that trying to learn with a neglected brain is like trying to run a marathon with a broken leg. The biological reality: exercise isn't just for your body, it increases blood flow to your brain and promotes the growth of new neurons. They figured it out because they were willing to question everything they'd been taught about learning and experiment with something better. The question is whether you're brave enough to abandon the methods that feel familiar but don't work, and embrace the methods that feel strange but actually do. Are you ready to find out what you're actually capable of? Nutrition isn't just fuel, it's the raw materials your brain uses to build neurotransmitters. Smart people have learned something that sounds obvious but most people ignore. Your brain is a biological system that needs maintenance. Sleep isn't just rest, it's when your brain consolidates memories and clears out metabolic waste. They've learned to trust their brain's natural learning mechanisms instead of fighting them. Smart people have learned to optimize their biology for learning. The method behind the madness: they've discovered that understanding is more powerful than memorization. That struggle is more effective than ease, and that spacing is more efficient than cramming. The smartest people I know have learned to make learning feel like detective work instead of drudgery. They've learned to love the discomfort of not knowing because they've discovered that's where knowing lives. But here's the final twist. They didn't figure this out because they're naturally smarter. The question isn't whether you're smart enough to learn this way. Your brain is waiting for you to learn how to use it properly.